Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Lightbend webinar, which is Developing Secure Scala Applications with Fortify for Scala. My name is Mohan Kompella, and I head product marketing here at Lightbend. Today, we have two speakers joining us, Seth Tisue from the Scala team at Lightbend, and Poonam Yadav from Micro Focus, formerly HPE. So while I introduce our experts in today's session, I wanted to run a quick poll and ask you one question. So if you can answer this, you should be able to see this on your screen. And if you can answer this, that would be fantastic while I run through the bios of our speakers today. So like I said, Seth is a senior engineer on our Scala team, and Poonam Yadav is the product manager for this product that we're going to be discussing today, and she is at Micro Focus. So if you're joining us today, then I guess one of the things is, securing your Scala application is probably a pretty high priority. And this is, obviously why we developed a SAST or Static Application Security Testing tool specifically for Scala code, which is the Fortify for Scala. So Seth here, who's on the webinar today, and Poonam were both pretty heavily involved with developing this plugin over the last several months. And today we're going to talk about the plugin, followed by a demo and a Q&A session at the very end. So as we go through the webinar, if you have any questions, please add them into the Q&A panel and go to webinar, and we'll get to them at the very end. Also, as a reminder, everyone will be in listen-only mode. So asking questions is basically going to be done through the Q&A panel. And at the very end, again, as a reminder, Seth is going to give you a live demo of the plugin at work with Fortify. So let me close the poll there. Thank you. And all right, Seth, over to you. I guess we could kick things off with your slides.
I think we're starting with Poonam, actually.
All right, Poonam.
Hi, and welcome, everyone. I am the product manager for the static code analyzer at Micro Focus. So I wanted to give you an overview of what Fortify is and what we do. So Micro Focus Fortify is an application security company, and we have products in the static space, dynamic space, and runtime space. So as you can see on the slide, the static code analyzer analyzes your source code and tells you all the places that you're potentially vulnerable to security attacks. The dynamic analysis product, it sits in QA or production, and it mimics attacks and would let you know where you're vulnerable to attacks. The runtime protection product called the App Defender, it is a real-time detection of vulnerabilities and also protection. All these products are backed by our scalable vulnerability management solutions that are available on-prem and on-demand. So all these products, the static, dynamic, and the application defender, all of them are available on-premise or on-demand, or you can make a hybrid solution as a combination of on-prem and demand. Moving on to the next slide. So today I'm going to focus on the static code analyzer because one, it is my product, and second, that is the product that the Scala security is built into. So as you can see on this screen, what we at Fortify are trying to do is that we want to secure the entire application development tool chain. So what we have, the number one block on the slide is a tool that sits in the IDE. And it is a spell checker kind of tool, but for security. So as you're writing in code, it will tell you all the places where your code is vulnerable. The second block is the SCA block. So this is a thorough security testing, which can be done from the IDE, or it can be done during your build process. But this is an in-depth security testing of your application. And the third one is the continuous monitoring, which is when your application is running in production. So the first two boxes are available as part of SCA, and the third product is a different product. Moving on to the next slide. I wanted to go over the integrations that Fortify provides. So we make it very simple for you and your development teams and your organization to use Fortify. We want to be able to integrate into all the tools that your development teams or your build teams might be using. So as you can see on the screen, we have integrations with IDEs like Eclipse, bug trackers like Jira, Bugzilla. We also have integrations with containers, with code repositories like GitHub, with Visual Studio, with build tools like Jenkins. And we also make all our APIs. We have Swagger supported REST APIs that are available on our marketplace, and you can leverage them to build your own integrations. In our latest release, which is coming out next week, we also have a GitHub repo where we provide examples of integrations that we have done and that you can use to build as a sample to build your own integration. Next slide, please. So coming to the topic of today's webinar, which is scanning Scala code. So the static code analyzer product supports 25 programming languages. Scala is our latest edition. It is our 25th language. While we are talking about static code analyzers, one aspect that we need to address is the software security research group at Fortify. So SCA is kind of like an engine. It analyzes your source code. It builds a intermediate syntax tree like a compiler would, and then it looks at the syntax tree and figures out all the ways the data can flow through your application and so on and so forth. So if I had to give an example, it would be like a map tool that will give you all the ways that you can reach the destination. And this is where the security research group comes in, which writes rules, security rules, that actually allow SCA to be able to make sense of the models that it has created. So in my map analogy, security research group would be the tool that tells you where to take a left, where to take a right, and figure out the optimum solution for you. So the security research group writes the rules that tell SCA where a potential vulnerability could be. And we have over 800,000 APIs that we support and 872 unique categories of vulnerabilities that we find in SCA. And we are going to dig a little more deeper into how many of these or what can be found in Scala specifically. But this is an overview of what Fortify SCA can do. Next slide. So Fortify has partnered with Lightbend, and we can now find vulnerabilities in your Scala apps. Lightbend is expert in Scala, and so they have written the front end or the translator for Scala. And it only makes sense because if you write a compiler, you are the best person to write the front end for Scala. Our team here at Fortify made sure that the models that came out of that translator were consumed by the back end of the SCA tool to find the vulnerabilities in conjunction with the Fortify SSR team that developed the rules for Scala. We will carry this model forward as we support more versions of Scala and also major frameworks like Play and Akka. So that's it from me. Now let me hand it back to Seth to run you through the specifics of this offering and also a demo.
Okay, thank you, Poonam. I think you set the stage for this well by saying that the topic today is static analysis. We're trying to catch security problems during development before they hit production. Static analysis shouldn't be your only line of defense, but it's your first line of defense, and it's the best time to catch problems is early. So Lightbend was interested in partnering with Micro Focus on this work because Fortify SCA is an established industry leader in static security analysis, because it already has strong support for Java and the JVM. Scala and Java are pretty close cousins, so that the work that was done on Java and JVM stuff for Fortify is applicable to us as well. But Fortify is also not Java specific. As we saw, it's very agnostic about languages, so there was room for Scala in their vision. As for why we wanted to do this ourselves and get involved directly, we wanted to leverage the Scala team's expertise on the Scala language and on the compiler itself. Lightbend is where the Scala compiler team, including myself, is based. That's where the compiler work happens. And more specifically, we wanted to leverage not just our knowledge, but actually leverage the Scala compiler as a piece of software. So I think it's really key to understanding why this effort is yielding quality results. That the Scala integration in SCA uses the real actual Scala compiler, and it's using it to understand the real actual Scala language. So there's this ensures of fidelity that the code that you write is the same, has the same meaning as the meaning that the Fortify analyzer sees, and means the same thing as the code that actually runs. If you're interested in this at all, I'm sure you're wondering that you have both of these questions. Can I use it? Will it fit my use case? And if so, when? So let me address those questions before we get into any more technical details. In order to use this, you need to be a Micro Focus customer and have a license for Fortify SCA. And you also need a Lightbend subscription. And Mohan will, at the end, will touch a little bit more on the benefits of that and what's involved. But it's so that this is not a separate thing, but part of a package at Lightbend. The Scala versions that we support are 2.12 and 2.11. We support all of the language in both cases. So that's that happens because the real compiler is what's backing that. We support Java 8. We are actively working on supporting Java 9. If you're interested in Java 6 or 7, there's no fundamental reason. I think that we couldn't add that, so that would be something to discuss with a sales rep if that's of interest to you. We hope that most people are on Java 8. It doesn't matter what build tool you're using to build your Scala code. We can accommodate any method of building the code. So SBT, Maven, and Gradle are all fine. You can also use the you can also use this if you're just running Scala-C from the command line. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. We support the 3 major ones. We've been working on this for about a year. The preview version has already, for the past few months, been in use by select customers. So we've already made some changes and improvements based on feedback from them. And we plan to make it generally available to all customers in just a few weeks. Okay, so that's the context of how this development effort came about, and I've covered the relevance to you on your Scala projects, what sort of environment this works in. So now I'd like to get a little deeper into how this actually works and how to use it on your own projects. Using Fortify SCA for Scala is a 3-stage process. In the first step, your Scala code is translated to an intermediate representation that's universal to all of the languages that SCA supports. So the translation step happens as part of your build, as we'll see in a minute. Once the translation step is done, then you run the Fortify backend, or the scanner. The source analyzer is the name of the binary, and that actually analyzes the translated code and generates a list of vulnerabilities that it finds. Once that list is generated, you can either you can dump it out in a terminal window, or Micro Focus also provides a GUI for viewing results, and we'll see that in the demo. So that's the overall flow: translate, scan, and then see what you got. The translation is done by a Scala compiler plugin that was developed here at Lightbend. It runs at a very late stage of the compilation pipeline. So it runs just before JVM bytecode is emitted. Some of you might be familiar with Scala.js or Scala Native, which are other alternate backends for the Scala compiler. The design here is similar. And it's important, and it's good news that it runs very late in compilation, because that means that the actual Scala compiler has simplified and flattened out the structure of the code. It has understood all of the sophisticated language features of Scala, and it has already translated it into a simple form. So that you know that no matter how fancy your types get, if you're using macros, all of the diverse features that are in Scala, they're all supported because they're handled by these earlier stages in the compilation pipeline. So the compiler plugin is just something that you add to your build. And as I've emphasized a few times already, that it's really key to ensuring fidelity, because the translation is part of your build. You know that you are translating the same code compiled with the same compiler version, with the same compiler options, and that ensures fidelity of meaning between what you wrote, what's being compiled, and what's being analyzed for security. In SBT, adding the plugin to your build is a matter of adding just a few snippets of code, and we'll see the details of this in the demo. Once translation is complete, then you move on to scanning, to actually finding the vulnerabilities. This process, it's only the translation part that's unique to Scala. So everything from here on is the same for any language that's supported by SCA. You can run the scan locally. You can also run it on your CI server. As Poonam mentioned, there's integrations available with lots of CI technologies. For viewing the results, you can do that at the command line or in the GUI, as we'll see in the demo. Everyone is surely wondering what kind of security issues does Fortify know about? What can it find in my Scala code? We started from a very strong position because Scala and Java are similar enough that all of the years of development that went into Fortify for Java is applicable to Scala code as well. You can use, as Scala users know, you can use Java libraries and frameworks from Scala just fine. And so the existing knowledge of that in Fortify carries over directly to Scala. Microfocus has also been adding Scala-specific knowledge, including the Play framework. It knows about the sysprocess API for starting external processes. And it knows how to track data flow through the Scala collections API. So, if you have a list and you call map on it, Fortify will not lose track of the provenance of that data, even as it goes through collections transformations. We'll see in the demo some sample categories of vulnerabilities: command injection, cross-site scripting, open redirects, server-side request forgery. Those are just examples. The overall list is really quite long.
Yes, Seth, I would just add one more point there, that if you are interested in seeing the whole list of what we support in Scala, also the APIs, specific APIs and libraries that we support in Scala, those two are available at Vulncat, so VULNCAT. I think it's .fortify.com, and you can see that, or you can also see our supported libraries document for that list.
Okay, thank you. A few features that we don't have yet but are already working on include an SBT plugin to make this a little easier to add to your build. As Poonam mentioned, they're already actively working on expanding the rule base to cover more libraries and frameworks. And we've also had a number of customers ask about support for Fortify on demand. So that's a Microfocus offering where instead of doing your scan locally, it can be done for you on their servers. We intend to support that sometime next year. As far as other improvements
sorry to interject, but that is already supported. So we can scan your application on Scala application on-prem or through Fortify on demand. The translation would have to be, yes, the translation would have to be done by the customer, and then they can send us their package of applications, whatever the translator has generated, and then Fortify on demand can run the scan and give you the results.
That's wonderful news. I'm glad to hear it. Support arriving ahead of schedule.
Yes.
As far as other planned features, we're really eager to hear from current and prospective customers what they would like to see to help guide where this goes next. Okay, I'm ready now to switch over to the demo. So we'll actually run Fortify on a sample project that we've prepared. It's called Play WebGoat, and this is the WebGoat name is based on there's a popular application called WebGoat in some other languages, that has lots of intentional security vulnerabilities put in it to demonstrate what you should not do. So this is a version of that that's specific to the Play framework. Having a sample like this is useful for education. Here's what you shouldn't do. It's also useful for testing and evaluating a tool like Fortify. So I will try to switch out of the slides and get the terminal window up. Yes. Now, one moment while I get my materials ready here. Okay. So in order to do this, I have prepared some things ahead of time. So I have I have installed Fortify already. And we see in my applications folder, I have a Fortify folder that includes both command line tools like Source Analyzer, and also includes GUI applications like Audit Workbench, which is the results viewer. So Fortify is already installed. The other thing that I've prepared is that I have a Lightbend subscription, and I have proof that like a credentials for that subscription. So that has I've already set up in this .lightbend folder in my home directory. I will clone the demo repository off of GitHub. This is an open source repository that you're welcome to try out yourself as well. There's nothing Fortify specific on the master branch in this repo, but I have prepared a branch called Fortify where we've made the necessary changes to the build in order to do translation. And I will show you I'll do git diff from the master branch so we can see that almost nothing is different. We have a fairly small amount of stuff that we've added in a .sbt file at the root level of the repository. So the top part gives me access to the plugin. The middle part actually enables the plugin. And then the third part tells the plugin that the name of my project. So this is it's called a build ID, and that's how we identify the translated files as an identifier, so we can track it through the multiple stages of this process. To actually do the translation, I'll fire up SBT. And because the compiler plugin has been added, when I run the compile command, that will do translation as well. Oh, sorry, I need to change an environment variable there and restart SBT. Sorry about that. Okay, that's resolving now. It was looking at my local artifactory, which is not what I intended. Okay, so we see this line that indicates that my license has been checked and that translation is now in process. It's done, and we can see that it actually did something by looking in the .fortify directory in my home directory. We specified a build ID of play webgoat, so there's now a directory under there that has the translated files. So if I want to see the vulnerabilities on the command line, I run source analyzer, specify the build ID, and say scan. Let's see, I'll need to give a full path to that. So it's doing the scan now. This does take a minute to start up. And while this is running, I'm not sure if there's anything else I should be mentioning. Yeah, okay, so here's the list. And this is not the most convenient method for browsing it, but having this available as plain text can be useful, like in a CI context, for example. But let's actually view the results an easier way. So I'm going to add .f scan.fpr. So this says FPR, I forget what it stands for, but it's like a Fortify results file. It's a packet of generated results that you can view in the GUI, that you can keep for later, that you can send to your colleagues so they can then look at it and so forth. So I'll add that and do the scan. And I can, while this is scanning, I can fire up the GUI application viewer, which is called Audit Workbench. Okay, looks like this is almost done. And when it is done, we'll be able to open it in this application. Okay, so let's make sure that we actually got a file out there. We did. Okay, so now we see the results. I hope the type on this is not too small to be visible. So in the upper left is the list of results. There's a summary here that shows us we've found 13 critical vulnerabilities and 1 high priority vulnerability. Those colors are also here. We can view the whole list or choose to look at the most critical ones first. These are the 4 categories of vulnerability that I mentioned earlier. Let's look at a sample one of the cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. So when I select it, this is an interesting one because it involves data flow. So this isn't just that there was a single line of code that the scanner looked at and said, "Hey, I see a problem there." The scanner actually analyzed how information is flowing through the code. And we can see the source code where the results were found. So that FPR file that we generated includes references to the source. Down here, there's English text that's explaining the problem, saying we had data that entered a web application through an untrusted source, and then send it back out to the browser. So that's a possible attack vector because a malicious user could cause unintended code to be executed that way.
Yeah, and on the left, you can also see the analysis evidence, which is a trace of where data entered and how it flowed through the. So at the bottom, the analysis evidence.
Yes, I see there in the lower left. So those are all the line numbers of code where the data flowed through.
Yeah, so it shows the flow of data through how it was consumed and how it entered the application and how it was finally consumed. And also where you showed the details, we also gave recommendations of how you can make this code secure. And the recommendation is always, and we give code examples, and those examples are in the language that is being scanned. So in this case, it would be Scala. If it was Swift code, the example would be in Swift. And so we provide very detailed information on every vulnerability that we find.
Okay, is there anything else that you'd like to highlight here in this application, or are we done?
I think the one thing is that the quick view that you're showing right now is on the upper left corner. The filter set is quick view. And if you can change it to security alter view, you will see more. So the quick view is just the things that we Fortify things are more critical and more important. And the security alter view shows all the vulnerabilities that we found. So just something to keep in mind.
I see that there's one more that shows up now that's a code correctness thing.
Right. So these are not that important according to Fortify, but if you wanted to see them, you can just switch to security alter view, and then you can see all the issues that we found. That's all I wanted to point out. We can move on.
Okay, I will switch back to the slides then. So we've seen the demo. And I will hand it back over to Mohan now to conclude.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. Thank you, Poonam. That was a pretty nice walkthrough of the Fortify product and the Scala plugin features. And Seth, I think the demo was pretty well received, just based on some of the questions I'm already getting. So before we move into Q&A, so just to reiterate, in order to be able to take advantage of this plugin for your Scala applications, you will require both a license from Fortify, a license from Micro Focus for Fortify SEA, and you also need a Lightbend subscription. Just based on a couple questions I received already in Q&A, in terms of how do you get your hands on this? If you have a relationship with Micro Focus, or formerly HPE, you can always contact your sales reps there. If you are a Lightbend subscriber, the good news is that you actually have access to this already as part of the subscription. So that's great. And if not, and if you have been using Scala but you're interested, then yeah, you can learn more about the subscription and what else is part of the subscription on the lightbend.com website. So that's one, and the other one is if you want to be in the loop in terms of the release for the Fortify Scala plugin, which is slated to happen in the next few weeks, then you can actually sign up for the early access notification list on the lightbend.com site. So you can go to lightbend.com/fortify and you would do that there. And the final thing I wanted to just very briefly mention before we move to Q&A is so at Lightbend we're very excited to be able to offer this plugin for your Scala code. As some of you may know, one of the Lightbend co-founders is actually Martin Odersky, who created the Scala language several years ago. So I think it plays pretty nicely to our heritage with Scala and our history with Scala. So we hope that you are able to take advantage of this in your own application environment also. So with that, I will go to Q&A. There's just as a quick reminder, in your GoToWebinar panel, there's a questions tab or section, and that's where you'll be able to add your questions. And the recording, all right, so that's where you add your questions. So the first question I wanted to address, which is a pretty easy one, so I'll take that, is are we going to share a recording of this webinar? And the answer is yes. So in the next few days, you'll actually get a copy of the recording as well as a copy of the slide deck that was used today, so that you will get that through email. All right, so that was the easy one. Moving on to more difficult ones, which is where I'm going to route them to Seth or Poonam. So Poonam, I think the first one came in as we were talking through your slides, which is the question is, what about support for Sublime and Atom, etc.?
So in the near future, we are targeting Play, and we already have support for, I would say, 80% of all the Play libraries. We are just looking for the last stretch. Once we are done with that, we will move on to other frameworks. We don't have any concrete plans for the Sublime and other frameworks that you mentioned, but that is something that we, as we progress with our support, we will continue to add.
I think the question is actually about IDE integration. Because that was something that I didn't that was something that I didn't show in my demo, that you can actually do a scan and see vulnerabilities in IntelliJ, for example. So I think that the question is about Sublime as an editor.
Oh, so I don't think that we have integration we have out-of-the-box integration with Sublime. We do have support for IntelliJ and Eclipse and other IDEs. So one, I can take it as an item and I can follow up. But as far as I know, we don't have an integration with Sublime.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. The next one was, and this came in, Seth, I believe, during your demo. The question is, do you support lambdas in flow analysis?
Yes, absolutely. So Fortify already understands lambdas in other languages, including Java and Python. So it was just a matter of making sure that the translator handled Scala lambdas similar as it already works for other languages.
Okay, great. The next question we have is, where can we get a list of the vulnerabilities that you can scan with this plugin? Poonam, is that?
So like I said, yeah, yeah, like I already mentioned, you can go to vulncat. I'm not sure because when we moved to Microfocus, we've changed all of our URLs. So earlier it was, but vulncat.fortify.com probably would be it.
Okay.
That is the customer portal, but I don't think that you need to be a customer to access OneCat because that is our sort of like, it's available to everyone. It's kind of listing all the categories that you can find in a language. So it's like kind of more like a thought leadership. It's product agnostic. And so, yes, I think that the first one over there. Right. And if you scroll to the bottom, you can view weakness data, and then you can, if you click on advanced, you can sort by languages. And so Scala is one of the languages there. Also, like Seth mentioned, that Scala would include all of the Java categories that are not specific to, let's say, Android or other things that don't apply to Scala. So a subset of the Java categories also apply to Scala. So you can go on this website and you can browse through all the categories that we find.
Okay. Awesome. And then anyone that wants to follow up on this can always send us a note, on lightbend.com/contact, or if you're a subscriber, you can use the support portal to send us additional questions. So I see that we are 46 minutes into the webinar, so I think we have time for maybe two last questions. So the first one is there support for logom? And I think I can probably take that one. As Poonam mentioned, there are other frameworks that we're actively developing support for, and then Clay is one framework that we are very actively working on. I believe that logom is also on the roadmap. We hope to have an update in the next few months there. And let me switch to
I'll just add that logom is built on top of Play, so I think there's a good chance that the knowledge base on Play would already apply to logom as well.
Okay, great. Good to hear that.
I mean, that does still leave room for adding logom specifics, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right. Thanks, Seth. So the last question that we have time for today is, I guess the question is, are there open source or academic licensing options for the plugin? And I think the answer is you would probably consider that on a case-by-case basis, especially in terms of the academic options. So the best thing would be to get in touch with us, and we can go from there. And then I guess this was like a two-part question. That was 1A, and then 1B is so Seth or Poonam, I'm not sure who wants to take this, but the question is how many of the rules are dependent on specific libraries being used, and what is the value in using libraries that haven't been covered by the rules, if I'm reading the question accurately?
I can take that. So the rules are specific to the libraries. So, okay, taking a step back, there are certain rules that are specific to libraries. There are certain rules that apply to, let's say, the flow of data within, like how you write the source code. So depending on that, there are two categories of rules. So, yeah, so that is I guess that is my answer. So there are certain rules that are specific to libraries, and that there are certain rules that will look for something like a hard-coded password, or if you're consuming data that has not been validated. So there are two kinds of rules. So that is part one of the answer. What was the second question?
Second one, I wasn't entirely clear, which is what is the value in using the libraries that haven't been covered by the rules?
Okay. Right. So one is that if you provide the source code of the library as you're scanning the application, then we can also scan the library, or we can look at the signature of the functions, and we can figure out what the input is to the function, what is the output to the function. So we can do a fair bit without having a rule specific to the library. If you don't have access to the source code, then that providing the signature is a good way to deal with that. Also, Fortify allows you to write your own rules. So if you wanted, if there was a library that was specific to your organization and you didn't want us to, get access to it and write rules for it, you can write rules for it yourself. So there's certain ways around that problem.
I'm glad that someone asked that, actually, because I think that's really one of the coolest things about Fortify is that it's possible for customers to add their own rules.
Okay, great. Yeah, that sounds like a really good option to have. All right. Attendees, thank you very much for your time. That's pretty much all the time that we have today. So in terms of next steps, if you want to be in the loop in terms of the plugin release schedule, etc., please go to lightbend.com/fortify to be on the early access notification list. If you're ready to move forward with the plugin, please contact your friendly Lightbend sales reps or your Fortify sales rep. Poonam has also graciously offered to be a point of contact for anyone that's interested in following up directly with her. Her email address is poonam.yadav@microfocus.com. So with that, we bring this webinar to an end. Thank you very much for your time again, and have a great day. Bye.